Relocating to an unfamiliar city is a big deal. It can be fun to pack your bags and relocate with the goal of a new adventure. But what happens when your expectations and the reality of your new city don't align? What happens when Salem turns out not to be the place for you? Well, in this video, we're going to talk about 5 reasons why you might want to reconsider relocating to Salem, Oregon. I'm going to tell you why some people relocate to Salem only to discover it really wasn't the right place for them after all. I myself relocated to Salem without knowing anything about the city, and if I had known some of the things we're about to talk about, I might not have relocated here at all. So stick around because we're going to have a candid conversation about why Salem isn't the right place for everyone. My name is Clarity Odd, and I'm a local real estate agent here in Salem who specializes in relocations. And just like you, I relocated to Salem, and now I get to make videos all about this amazing city for you, my future clients. If you want to hire me to be a real estate agent here in Salem, all you got to do is book a one-on-one consultation with me. You can find a link to get on my calendar in the description down below. About 5 years ago, my husband and we packed our bags and moved to Salem, Oregon without knowing anything about the city. And since then, I've become a real estate agent, and I get to help people who are going through the exact same journey that I did 5 years ago. I have clients who are relocating from all across the United States, like New York, Florida, California, Utah, Hawaii, Texas, and beyond. Some people are wanting to escape the skyrocketing home prices elsewhere, maybe the higher taxes, the crazy weather patterns, or the politics, but a lot of people just want a new adventure here in Salem, Oregon. No matter the reason why people are relocating to Salem, I've met a lot of people that end up telling me that either Salem or the state of Oregon turned out not to be the right place for them after they relocated here. There were things that they just didn't realize that actually turned them off about living in Oregon. And unfortunately, I've gotten phone calls from people that found my videos only after they moved to Salem, Oregon, and said that now they regret their decision moving here and want help selling their house so that they can get out of Oregon quickly. So today I'm going to be sharing with you the 5 reasons that people do not like living in Oregon, but more specifically, Salem, Oregon. My husband and I have been here for about 5 years, and we don't have any plans to leave ourselves. And I've helped numerous clients that love it here. But this video is going to help you ensure that you do not regret your decision relocating to Salem, Oregon. Salem is not the right place for everyone, and that is completely okay, because after this video, you are gonna know if Salem might be the right place for you, or if you're like, oh my God, I'm so glad I did not relocate there. The last reason that we're going to talk about on the list just might surprise you. And I wouldn't say that it prevents anyone from moving here, but it's a hot topic that a lot of people end up discussing in things like Facebook groups and my YouTube comment section. So stick around until the end to find out exactly what people are chatting about. Let's first talk about the weather and natural disasters. The weather here in Oregon really does come down to perspective, because at this point in my career, I've talked to enough people who are relocating to Oregon that really love the idea of 8 to 9 months of colder and rainier weather. But I've also talked to plenty of clients who are a little bit sad that they're not going to see much sun. So perspective plays a lot into this, and it really does come down to where you are relocating from and what kind of weather you like to begin with. We are going to break down some of the common weather patterns that we have here, and then I'm going to give you my own perspective about the weather here in Salem. We're also going to talk about some of the natural disasters that we have in this part of the United States, because it's something that not a lot of people who relocate here have ever considered before. And it is pretty common for my clients to get here and encounter some of these natural made phenomenons and feel completely confused by their existence here in Oregon. Salem is the state capital of Oregon, which means that we are right in the heart of the Pacific Northwest. Most people, when they think of the Pacific Northwest, they think of large trees and really wet and dank forests. and that is definitely a part of the Pacific Northwest. But there is more diverse topography and different climates here in Oregon and Salem than I think people realize. All of the rain that we get here, which is typically about 8 to 9 months out of the year that it rains, it's going to give us really lush, green, and dank forests that we have all around here in Salem, but also just Oregon as a whole. It is very forested here. The rain can feel pretty treacherous if you're not used to it, and that can become an issue if you're used to seeing the sun every single day or every other day in the wintertime. But in the wintertime, you can expect that not only is it going to be rainy a lot of the days here, whether that be in the form of misty rain or complete downpour, but you should expect that the skies are going to be gray and overcast. And on the shortest day of the year, the sun is going to be setting around 4:30 p.m. This in itself is a huge difference for a lot of people unless you are already living in a kind of upper section of the United States. Having sun seasonality and the sun setting around 4:30 p.m. in the shortest day of the winter is going to be a huge shift for you if you're not prepared for it. When you put on top of the sun seasons that we have here, the rain and the gray skies that we get here in tandem with the sun setting early, it really can be a bit depressing your first winter here. The idea of having a wet and rainy climate is nothing new to my clients who are relocating to Salem. And like I said, a lot of people are actually looking forward to those rainy, cozy vibes. But what does take them aback and surprise them is the fact that you just don't see the sun, and it gets dark way sooner than anyone actually thinks happens. I lightly just mentioned this in the fact that we get misty rain, and that's something that I've actually found to be unique to Salem specifically. I relocated from Portland, which is just 45 minutes north of Salem, and while the climates are almost identical, the one thing that is pretty darn different is that Salem gets this misty rain that lasts all day. And ladies, let me just tell you that it does no favors for your hair and the frizziness that you might already be prone to. When I lived in Portland, I felt like it was more of a downpour or a heavier type of rain, and it was never really misty or foggy rain. And so that kind of actually surprised me when I moved here and I found out that we have fog and this weird kind of misty rain. When I relocated here, I thought that the weather patterns were going to be identical to Portland, but truth be told, it is slightly different. Winter here lasts for about 8 to 9 months, and really our summer times don't kick in until around June, and it wraps up around August or mid-September. The summertime is when you're gonna see a lot of people out and about. Just like the sun has seasonality in the winter time, it does have seasonality in the summer as well. So it doesn't set until about 9:30 p.m., which means us Oregonians, when we are out and about in the summertime, in the sun, it is an all day long 12 plus hours of soaking up the sun. We become like these little lizards that come out of hibernation and we just cannot get enough sun. That way of experiencing summertime, I know, is a lot different for many of my clients who are used to seeing the sun every single day. And there's not seasonality to the sun, so it's just kind of a normal thing that you might already be experiencing. You know, having a day in the sun is normal. But here in Salem, when the sun comes out, whether that be in the summertime or in the springtime for a few hours, everyone does everything that they can to go out and soak up those sun rays while we have it, because we know that it's such a limited resource here. During the summertime, the temperatures are getting warmer here, and on the hottest days, you can expect that it will be between 90 to 105 if we're really pushing it. It does get pretty dusty here in the summertime when everything dries out because we are surrounded by so much farmland here in Salem. So if you have allergies, expect that you are going to have an itchy nose, and it's going to be in your best interest to take preemptive measures and just take a lot of allergy pills before summertime actually hits here. I promise that is going to help mitigate some of the allergies that you're going to happen upon because of all the new pollen that you encounter here. One little quirk about living in Salem is that it wasn't always such a hot place in the summertime, which means that a lot of older homes, they were never equipped with central air or air conditioning units. Most people at this point in time have retrofit their house to have AC of some kind, but if you're looking for an older character home, don't be surprised when that house does not have central air conditioning. But the good news is it's pretty darn easy to retrofit an older home with air conditioning nowadays. The best way to do it is get yourself a mini split, which has the ducting on the outside of the house and has like that white kind of block on the inside towards the ceiling. I do feel like we're at the point in the increase of temperatures in our summertime that you are going to be very uncomfortable if you do not have air conditioning in your house. And that feels like it's really changed in the past 10 years or so. It used to be really commonplace to just open up your windows at night and have the cooler air cool down your house. But I just think it's too hot now for that to be a viable method. You really do need AC nowadays. We do have rain for about 8 to 9 months out of the year, but from all of that rain, we get really lush, beautiful landscapes, and that's not just about the forests that we have surrounding us. We also have things like the high desert, which is more part of Central Oregon, but we also have an incredible coastline that has rugged and really beautiful beaches. And then here in Salem specifically, we're in the heart of the Willamette Valley. And so all of that rain that we get here in the Willamette Valley, it gives us great access to produce and vineyards and farms and a whole heck of a lot of agricultural productions. And this is a huge reason why my clients who love the rain are finding themselves here in Salem. It's because we are in the Willamette Valley, which means we have very fertile soil. And a lot of my clients tend to love gardening. And Salem is the perfect place to have a garden or a hobby farm because it is so lush and green and easy to grow things here. We do not have much humidity here, and the worst that it gets is just kind of like stagnant air. That's not necessarily humidity, it's just that the air doesn't move and it feels a bit stifled. But in terms of humidity, where you just get like hot and sticky all over, it's not really a big issue here. We do sometimes get thunderstorms with lightning, but again, that's just not very common. I would say that it happens probably once or twice in the summertime, and it's really a great spectacle. People will get super excited by the fact that there's lightning and thunder because it is just kind of a rare event for us. But again, it just really doesn't get too humid to force those weather events to happen like you might find in other parts of the US. We don't have things like hurricanes or tornadoes, but we do have dirt devils, which are like itty bitty tornadoes that have no ability to pick you up and throw you about like Dorothy, but they are pretty fun to watch because they are harmless and you can, get close to them and enjoy the view. I know for a lot of my clients who are moving from places where you have to deal with hurricanes or tornadoes, you can rest easy knowing that we do not have those things here. We do sometimes get hail in the winter time, but those hails that we typically get are pretty small and they're kind of like the size of Dippin' Dots. And so it kind of looks like little Dippin' Dot ice cream is scattered throughout the ground. And if you're coming from a place that's accustomed to like golf ball size hail, that is something that I have never seen here before. If you, my friend, are finding value in this video, give it a thumbs up and go down to the comments and tell me if you feel like you could survive an Oregon winter here. Although we don't get large hailstorms, we do get hailstorms maybe 5 times during the winter season, if that. But something that you probably are not expecting that we get here is ice and snowstorms. In the past 5 years that I've lived in Salem, we have had 2 ice storms. And when these ice storms happen, the entire city shuts down. When we're talking about ice storms, we are not talking about snowstorms or it being like nice fluffy snow. No. Ice storms mean that there's usually about 1 inch of ice on all surfaces, which includes things like the roads. This means that it's nearly impossible to drive no matter the size of your car, no matter how much it weighs, if you have chains or if you have studded tires. It just does not matter. You are going to be slipping and sliding around because it's ice that you're dealing with. This ice also has the ability to expand when it heats up a little bit, and then when it'll retract when it cools down, and that leads to a lot of trees breaking and their branches possibly falling on your property. So if you are considering a house that has trees on your property, you should expect to have tree maintenance on a yearly basis. This past season, we did have an ice storm, and because nobody could get anywhere around the city for about a week, one of my relocating clients who found me on YouTube, we couldn't actually close on their house because the entire city shut down, which means that we had to actually delay closing until the city opened back up. Everything worked out fine, but do be mindful that when Salem shuts down because of an ice storm, everyone is just gonna get stuck in their house, and it is really difficult and dangerous to get anywhere. It is completely different from a snowstorm. We do on occasion get snow here in Salem, but it tends to either just turn into ice when it heats up and then it cools down again, or it's just snow that is super light and fluffy and just doesn't stick. Salem is situated right along the Willamette River, and so we do have little streams and creeks that are running throughout Salem proper. So we do have certain areas of town that are in a designated flood zone. And these areas you are likely going to need to talk to your insurance provider to figure out what kind of insurance, if any, you need for that flood zone. Overall, here in the Pacific Northwest, we are really built to withstand a lot of rain each winter. And so we have a lot of city measures put in place already to redirect the water. So flooding is not really a big issue for us. But again, there are certain areas of town that do fall into a flood zone category. And if that's a concern for you and you don't like the idea of living in a flood zone or obtaining flood insurance, it's very easy to avoid these areas around Salem because they are just so small and very specific. So I know that flooding sounds really scary. It's like a scary word, but it's really easy to avoid here. So it's not as scary as it sounds. Before I mention the natural disasters that we have here in Salem and Oregon in general, and that is going to come in the form of forest fires. We do have wildfires here every single summer, and it is just a normal part of life here and a part of the summer season. But sometimes those fires can get larger or out of control. But most of our wildfires start in eastern Oregon, which is completely just desert landscape and really dry, which means that if the wind is blowing just right, those fires can be pushed closer towards us to the west. But that really doesn't mean that you need to worry about your house burning down here from the wildfires, because they really just don't get that close. The worst that's gonna happen is, again, that wind is gonna blow and we're gonna get smoke from those fires. When we do get smoke blowing in from the fires out in eastern and central Oregon, it's kind of weird and post-apocalyptic, and everything is covered in soot. So do be mindful that you're probably going to want to pop on a mask to protect those precious lungs of yours, because you will be inhaling ash if you don't. I know that talking about a forest fire sounds incredibly scary, especially if you've never had one in, your state or close to you, but I'm here to tell you that forest fires are very, very normal here, and it's just a natural part of the cycle that we have because we have so much forested area in Oregon. We got it under control. You will be okay. The worst you're gonna have to deal with is just the smoke that comes from those fires. Now, the other natural disaster that you should be mindful of is the potential for an earthquake. Oregon is on the Cascadia subduction zone, which is right off of the Oregon coast, and we are said to be long overdue for a massive earthquake. On the Oregon coast, you do see signs of tsunami zones, and this is what those signs are in reference to. We are expecting to have an earthquake at some point in time in the future, and when that happens, we are also expected to have a tsunami, which means that we do have designated evacuation zones on the Oregon coast. Salem is about an hour inland from the Oregon coast, so you really don't need to worry about a tsunami wave coming into Salem. We are far enough away that we're not going to have to worry about the water ramifications of a tsunami or an earthquake, but the Oregon coast, yeah, they better be worried. As you probably can tell, I am no geologist, and I have no idea how an earthquake would actually affect the city of Salem, and it's really not something that we talk about hey, are you ready for the earthquake? We just don't talk about it. It's not something that's top of mind for people, but do be prepared that if you're not used to the idea of an earthquake, we're likely going to have one at some point in time if you live here for a long duration of time. So the takeaway here for what you can expect in terms of weather here in Salem really comes down to an abundance of water and wetness. Salem is pretty prepared for all of the water that we get from the snow runoff from the mountains, which fills our rivers. We're prepared for all of of the rain that we get, but we do still have a long way to go to figure out, how to handle those dang ice storms that we get. We don't have things like tornadoes or hurricanes, and we really don't have too bad of a humidity issue. But what you should be mindful of is that it's common for older homes not to have air conditioning. Before we dive into this next one, as somebody who's also relocated to Salem from somewhere else, I know exactly how challenging it is to relocate, and I only relocated from 45 minutes away. If you are needing or wanting more support in this process, schedule that one-on-one consultation with me so that I can help you plan your relocation here so you don't have to go about it alone. Next on our list is the fact that it gets very rural very fast here. And as you can see, Salem is located about 45 minutes south from Portland, and it's located about an hour to an hour and a half to the Oregon coast, and it is located right in the middle of the Willamette Valley. But there is so much of Salem and Oregon as a whole that's just not densely populated. And Salem is kind of a small place. We have less than 200,000 residents. We also have something called the Urban Growth Boundary. The UGB, or the Urban Growth Boundary, looks like this, and I know that this map is a little bit fuzzy, but this darker line is the outline of the city of Salem and shows us where the UGB line is defined. Now, this concept might be completely new to you because Oregon is unique in that our cities are outlined where developers can and cannot develop new homes. This means that outside of the UGB line, it is typically farmland, forest, and rural country living. So when you go outside of the city of Salem, you really are going to be in the countryside very, very quickly. From the heart of downtown Salem to the south, you can be outside of the city limits and outside of the UGB line in the countryside in about 20 minutes flat. And that really goes for any part around Salem. If you're starting in the downtown center, if you go out in almost any direction, you are just going to be 20 minutes from just rural countryside where you feel like nobody else exists. Earlier, we were talking about how Salem is surrounded by farmlands and it's really lush, and the urban growth boundary line really supports this idea that you have a focal point to the city center. You have a very definitive line as to where the builders can and cannot put new construction developments. And it drops off just like that. For my friends who are relocating from larger sprawling cities, for example, Dallas, Texas, you are used to massive cities that go on and outward and outward. And Salem is just not like that. We have a very, very defined outline of where the city has high density living and where it becomes countryside. I've been doing this long enough to learn that you are either gonna love the idea of living in the countryside, or you're gonna say, nope, I don't want to be driving to the countryside at all. Sounds like a pain in the tookie. But the great news is, if you want to live within the city limits or you want to live in the countryside, great. Salem can accommodate both of those lifestyles. And I actually think that the fact that Salem has such a rural landscape so incredibly quickly and close to the city is a huge highlight, because you can have country living but still have easy access to city amenities. So if you are one of my friends on the internet who loves the idea of living in the countryside, but you really don't love the idea of being secluded and driving an hour to get to your local Costco or retail center, you don't even have to worry about that, because it's probably just gonna take you about 20 to 30 minutes to get from your country house to downtown Salem or Costco or wherever you need to go. Conversely, if you're like, oh my God, Clarity, I would never find myself living out in the middle of the country, and the idea of having to drive to get all of my needs met is just atrociously terrible. Well, great, because you have a lot of options available to you as well. If you are like the majority of my YouTube clients, you like the idea of living in a home that is not necessarily on acreage, but you like the idea of privacy. And this is great news, because we also have that available here in Salem. There are certain neighborhoods that are going to be really ideal for creating privacy even in the city proper, whether that be through hillside living or a larger lot, or you just want to be surrounded by trees, all of these options are available to you. And I think that this is a really unique asset that Salem has. You can have city living, but still feel like you have privacy. If you have a budget around $600,000 or more, you can definitely find a property in Salem that's going to be 10 minutes from your local grocery store, 10 minutes to downtown, 10 minutes to everything. But you also can feel like you're living in a tree house and not looking in your neighbor's window while you both are doing dishes at the same time. That can get a little bit awkward. If you like the idea of living in a little bit more rural countryside lifestyle, great, because West Salem might be a great option for you. West Salem is a really unique space to live in, and most people tend to avoid West Salem because they don't like the idea of having to cross that West Salem bridge to get into downtown Salem or other parts of the city. But West Salem is really great if you like the idea of living on small acreage or just a little bit bigger of a house and you don't necessarily want to be close to your next door neighbors, but potentially you do like the idea of living close to wine country here in Oregon. If you like that idea, then West Salem should definitely be on your list of places to check out. Like I mentioned, West Salem is not for everyone, which is why we have these conversations on the front end so that we can either put West Salem on the yes list of places to check out or just scratch it off completely. To summarize, if you are looking for a massive sprawling city that just goes on and it takes you an hour just to get across the city, that's not what you're gonna find here in Salem. Instead, you're gonna find a smaller city that takes about 20 minutes to get from one point to another point. And you can be out in the rural countryside incredibly quickly. You can also find yourself on a backcountry road where you're not gonna see anyone for probably your entire drive. Because Salem gets rural really quickly, you can make your dreams of owning chickens or horses or cows or goats, which are my personal favorite. You can make that dream a reality and still have incredibly easy access to all of the city amenities that Salem has to offer. You are not going to have to sacrifice an hour out of your day just to drive into the city of Salem. A lot of my clients who are relocating to Salem, oftentimes they are looking for a new adventure or just a different lifestyle. And Salem offers a lot of different versions of life here. Most of my clients really love the idea of not living on top of their next door neighbor, and they want a little bit of land or space to breathe. And I think that that's really interesting that people are gravitating towards Salem for that exact purpose. And I'm here to tell you that you can find that in spades here in Salem. You just have to know where to look, or know who to ask, which is me. You ask me. Before I get to my next point, if you are moving to Salem, Oregon, and you are buying a house here, book that one-on-one consultation with me so that we can develop a relocation plan for you. You can get on my calendar by clicking on the link in the description down below. The next point is one that comes up most for my clients who are relocating from a bigger metropolitan area, and that is their newfound appreciation for the slower pace of life here in Salem. If you are not prepared for a slower pace of life, you are going to be in shock with just how much slower and chill Salem is compared to a big metropolitan city. Most of my clients who move into Salem, they are looking forward to this. And my guess is that probably you are looking forward to a little bit slower pace of life as well. I don't want to give you the wrong impression and say that slower means boring or lame. It really just means that the high intensity lifestyle that you find from living in a bigger city, it's just not really like that here. Salem is a city with under 200,000 residents, and it is the state capital of Oregon, so there is a lot of business going on. There are a lot of people who have timelines and things to do and places to be, but it's no New York. It's no LA. You are not going to be finding yourself stuck in traffic and waiting hours and hours just to get across the city. You can expect that when you strike up a conversation with somebody, they're going to want to chat with you and they're going to want to connect with you. And so it's not just about people walking really quickly on the sidewalk with their heads down. Sure, those things happen, but it's just not the overall vibe that you're going to get from a place like Salem. My clients who most oftentimes relocate from places like San Diego, LA, New York, Chicago, Dallas, those big places, they are finding that they can just breathe here and they can collectively just take a sigh of relief because the intensity is just cranked down. If you're sadistic and you like the idea of sitting in traffic for hours on end, trying to get across town, you are severely going to be disappointed to know that the traffic here, you're just gonna need to tack on about 10 to 15 minutes on top of your normal commute time. You're probably like me, and you are gonna see this as a huge benefit and time saver. Generally speaking, it's gonna take you about 20 minutes to get anywhere around Salem. So if we factor in traffic on the worst days, it's gonna take you about 35 minutes for you to commute from work to home or wherever you are going. I wanna make sure that I don't put Salem into this like really casual, slow, tiny town vibes. Salem does have hustle and bustle. It's just not at the same level and caliber of a large metropolitan city. When I relocated from Portland to Salem, I didn't realize how much I needed or wanted a slower pace of life. I got to the point where when I was living in Portland, I needed to tack on an hour to my commute time. I needed to plan my entire day around traffic and commuting, and that had a huge mental impact on my mood and just my outlook in general. So when I got to Salem, and it took me only 20 minutes to get around town, even when there was traffic, it was like, oh my God, an additional 10 minutes on top of that? Sure. What a mental relief and alleviation came from not having to think about traffic. I also find that when my husband and I, when we go out on date night, we just go to a restaurant or happy hour. We don't have to sit there for 40 minutes and wait. We can putz around and be languid and enjoy our drink and just chill. That in itself has been a huge just weight lifted off my shoulders and a sense of alleviation that I didn't know I needed. If you're looking for a slower pace, Salem is going to sound really great, but I do have to say that for my clients who were not prepared for the slower pace of life that Salem has to offer, they felt very uncomfortable with the slower pace here. And that's okay, because Salem is not the right place for everyone. It might take you some time to settle into the groove here, but as long as we're setting the expectations properly on the front end, and you know that Salem is a little bit slower pace of life compared to big metropolitan areas, everything's gonna be just fine. Next on our list is talking about walkable neighborhoods. I have a whole heck of a lot of clients who are moving into the Salem area and they are wanting walkable neighborhoods. And what we're defining as walkable here is not somebody's physical ability to walk or not walk. We are simply talking about proximity to amenities like the grocery stores, restaurants, and entertainment areas. A lot of people come into downtown Salem and they think, oh my God, it's just so stinking cute and charming. This would be a really great area to be able to walk to my house. And the reality is that Salem is not constructed in a way that's very conducive to walkable neighborhoods or really being able to walk around the city. When I first relocated to Salem, I was incredibly taken aback by how much I needed to use my car. I like my car. I don't really mind having to drive everywhere, but my lifestyle in Portland was all about hopping on the streetcar or walking across downtown to my favorite restaurants, and so my car really wasn't something that I used on a daily basis. But when I got to Salem, I realized that you cannot walk here, and the city is very car dependent. There are a handful of neighborhoods that I would consider to be walkable in the way that you can just open up your front door and you can get to, restaurants or bars in about 10 to 15 minutes. But compared to a larger metropolitan city where there are these neighborhoods that are just set up like mini downtowns, we really don't have that here in Salem. Overall, downtown Salem feels like a destination rather than a zone for living, which I think is starting to change because the city's realizing that we need more housing in the downtown area and it's a really great place to live. But at the moment, if you're looking for a walkable neighborhood, you are going to have about 2.5 neighborhoods to actually choose from. The rest of them are going to be residential spaces where maybe you have a quickie mart on the corner somewhere, but otherwise you're just going to have to jump in your car and go drive to get your groceries or other amenities that you might want. And I think that is actually a pretty big disappointment. But as long as you understand that Salem is not really a walkable city and it doesn't have a lot of walkable neighborhoods to choose from, you're gonna be okay. Just realize that you are gonna have to depend on your car a lot more in the city of Salem than you might be used to. But if you are like a lot of my clients and you say, ooh, my main focus is finding a walkable neighborhood in Salem, like I mentioned, you are gonna have 2.5 neighborhoods to choose from. And I'm saying 2.5 because one of them kind of feels like, I don't know, it kind of could be on the list, but it kind of could not be on the list as well. It's like I'm giving it a participation trophy for making it on the list. But the two main neighborhoods that I would designate as like massively walkable and easy to walk into downtown Salem and restaurants and parks, those two neighborhoods are going to be the Fairmount neighborhood, and then the other one is going to be the Bush Park neighborhood. So again, if your primary focus is walkability, then these two neighborhoods are going to be really, really great for you. The one caveat with these neighborhoods is the fact that they're going to be more historic and older homes. The price points are also going to tend to be on the higher end for the size of house that you can get. The neighborhood that got the participation trophy for making it onto this list is the neighborhood of Grant. I'm feeling like this is only half on the list, half off, because it's not as walkable as the other two neighborhoods on this list. But what it does have, and what it's really great for, is being the closest residential neighborhood to getting to things like the farmers market. And I think that that is a huge highlight of the Grant neighborhood. So if you have dreams of living in downtown Salem and you just love the idea of having everything at your doorstep, and you're thinking like, oh my God, maybe downtown Salem has cute little brick townhomes that you can move into. I'm so sorry to tell you, but that really just doesn't exist here. We have two major condo complexes in the downtown area, and we do not have our own version of townhomes or brownstones here in downtown Salem, which again means that if you are wanting a focus on and a lifestyle on walkability, you got to go back to those two neighborhoods, that I guess 2.5 neighborhoods that we just talked about. At the beginning, I mentioned that we were going to be talking about a hot button topic that comes up a lot in Facebook groups and different online platforms, and that is the cost of living here in Salem, Oregon. Throughout my entire career, I have had many people reach out to me saying that they want to purchase a home for $200,000. Now, don't get me wrong, that is a good budget in certain states around the US, but here in Salem, Oregon, you cannot get a stick shack for $200,000. A lot of people have this perception that because Salem is the state capital of Oregon and it's smaller and maybe not as desirable as a place like Portland, that it's going to be a cheap place to live. And the reality is that that could not be further from the truth. We are seeing that prices, like many cities across the United States, the home prices here are increasing year over year. And at the time that I made this video, the average sales price for a home here in Salem was at $430,000. Mind you, that is simply the average. And so it is much more common that home prices are higher than $430,000. A lot of people are going to be turned off by the fact that $430,000 is going to be not buying you a spacious luxury home here, but in fact, it's going to be closer to a starter home. Typically, it's going to be around 2 or 3 bedrooms, 2 to 1.5 baths, just a very standard house. This topic of cost of living really comes down to perspective and where you are relocating from. But I know right off of the bat that my clients who have the perception that Salem must be cheaper because it's not Portland, they tend to be incredibly disappointed by the reality of the price tags of real estate here in Salem. Now look, I help clients who are looking for houses at any price point, but unless you are expecting to get a smaller house or a duplex for a lower price point, you are likely going to have sticker shock by how much real estate actually costs here. Most oftentimes, my clients who are relocating, they are coming from higher cost of living places, and so they tend to see Salem as a cheaper alternative and option to living in a place like Portland. But if you are coming from a lower cost of living place, you are going to have sticker shock when you realize that the price of real estate here in Salem, it is not so cheap. Now, to my future clients who are watching this, who are relocating from California, Hawaii, New York, Washington, you are likely going to feel like we are just giving away houses here. But again, this all just comes down to perspective and where you are relocating from. House prices are really easy to find online, and we can generally say that you need to have a budget of upwards of $400,000 or more and the right expectations to purchase a house here in Salem. But what we're going to talk about now is the cost of utilities, because this seems to be a huge variable for all of my clients no matter where they are relocating from. They are either shocked at how expensive or how cheap the utilities are. What we're looking at here is a Reddit page all about Salem, and somebody made a post asking everyone about what their 2023 utility bill was for the month of December. So this person is on Salem Electric, which is one of 2 utility providers here in Salem, the other being PG&E. This person had an oil-filled radiator and then a portable heater, and their monthly bill for December 2023 was $168 for that month. Next, we're going to be looking at this person who had PG&E customer. They have electric heating, they work from home, and they got very specific in what their thermostat was set at, which was 68 degrees for 8 to 12 hours. And let me just say, that sounds freezing. I like to keep my thermostat at like, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, like 76 degrees. I like it really warm. Okay, but moving on, they moved their thermostat down to 60 in the nighttime. They said that their electric bill for December 2023 was at $288, but that their average electric bill for 2023 was at $236 per month. Now, this is just to give you a quick snapshot of what you can expect for your electric and heating bill, but there are going to be other bills to consider, like gas, if you have gas in your house, which is pretty darn common. You have water, you have sewer bills, and then you're also going to need to pay for your garbage service here. If you want to investigate this Reddit page where everyone's talking about their utility costs, I have linked that down in the description below. And if you stuck it out to the end of this video, congratulations. I'm even losing my voice. This was a big video. And so to reward you, I'm going to be giving you a bonus topic that not a lot of people take into consideration before relocating here. And that is the fact that we do not have sales tax. That sounds great, right? But we do have income tax. And so depending on how much you make, you are going to be taxed differently depending on your tax bracket that you fall into. But if you are not prepared for this shift in taxation, it can be a huge shock to you when you see your tax bill come tax time here in Oregon. But all of these things that we talked about feel like things that, yay, you're okay with, and you still feel like the idea of moving to Salem is the right one for you. Book that one-on-one consultation with me so that we can set up a plan for you to relocate here to Salem. If you enjoyed this video, you, my friends, are going to want to watch this one next. Bye-bye.